Welcome to the Dr. Anne Marie Evers Show. The doctor is in the house. Do 2 affirmations and call me in the morning. Change your life one new thought at a time. Make your dreams come true. Attract that lasting, loving relationship, successful career, radiant health, and abundant wealth. Tune in to the Dr. Anne Marie Evers Show and learn positive ways to get what you want on www.contacttalkradio.com.
And welcome to the Dr. Anne Marie Evers Show, where dreams really can and do come true, and they really do. And welcome to the home of angels, affirmations, goodness, what else? Affirmation thoughts, mind power, creative visualization, and much, much more. And also, I have a very, very special guest today that is going to share some information that I think is going to be very valuable to people worldwide. And I just think you might want to just take a moment and grab a paper and a pen and make some notes as we're talking. So I want to say my very special guest today is Mike Anthony, and this young man has done a lot of things. First of all, welcome to the show there. How are you doing?
Hi, Dr. Anne Marie Evers. I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad and so happy. Now, can you tell us maybe before we start the show about other things, tell a little bit about you and how you got started in doing what you're doing and becoming an author, and maybe things like that people could make notes and see how you coped with what you were going through.
Sure, yeah. My life has been, gone in some different directions. I initially had planned on being a science teacher, and I went to college for that. And then in the meantime, I'd also been doing a lot of acting through high school and college. And then I ended up instead with an acting degree, and I became an actor and moved to New York City. And then I took a day job working as a bartender for Broadway theaters. And then I spent the past 6 years working for Hamilton, being the bar manager for Hamilton on Broadway, which was an extraordinary experience. So I wrote a book called Life at Hamilton about my experiences there.
What was the name of the book, Michael? Mike, what was the name of the book?
It's called Life at Hamilton.
Life at Hamilton. Okay. Sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to make sure the listeners got that. Okay?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay, yeah. MikeAnthony.com is the website, and that has the books and everything that I've been working on if people are interested. But meanwhile, as I'm living that life as an actor and a bartender, my dad suddenly and shockingly passed away. And it was a devastating experience for my family. For us, it came completely out of the blue. He was 60 years old, but he was a young 60, and we thought that he was going to live for many, many more years. So that sent my life in this completely unexpected direction that ended up being just opening up a whole new world to me. And that's what I spend a lot of my time thinking about and researching now.
Yes, and I know what that feels like too, because my children's father, he was at work, and I called him from my work and said our daughter had a sore throat, and he said, he was a chef, and he said, well, when I come home, I'll make some chicken soup for her. And he said, love you. And I said, love you. And then went back in my office, and about half an hour later, somebody said, you better come sit down in the closing room. And I said, why? And it was my son on the phone saying his dad had dropped dead right at a heart attack. And so I know how it feels. And it sure is a shock to your whole system, isn't it?
Complete shock. Yeah. I mean, I think it's got to be one of the hardest things about being a human being. It's just not something that you can prepare for at all. Even if you are, quote unquote, prepared for it. If someone is dealing with a disease that's terminal, and you have time, for instance, to adjust to the idea that this person is going to be transitioning, it's still hard when they do. The physical loss is no less jarring and traumatic. So yeah, it's not easy being a human being. Yeah.
And no matter what happens, we're all human, and we all sort of think, what if we had done this? What if we had done that? No matter
Right.
what happens, maybe I could have saved him. I thought, what if he hadn't gone to work that day? What if he'd stayed home? And all these things. So we're dealing with all these emotions, aren't we?
Yeah, absolutely. You're left with all of those questions. I went through the same questions. Did we miss any signs? Was my dad maybe not feeling well and we didn't notice it because I wasn't paying enough attention? I mean,
yeah,
exactly. Guilt can be a real big one when you deal with something like that, for sure.
Oh, yes, it can be, and it can be overwhelming to the point where that's what you think about, it's not good to focus on that, but there's nothing we can do. It is accept it. But what a friend and I did, we did some videos on my AnneMarieEvers.com site. And talking about the 5 stages of death and dying and how to handle it. And a lot of people found that very interesting and supportive. And I was thinking, together with your book, what you're going to share with us, I think it's going to give people a lot more information about how to handle something like that, because of course the 5 stages are the shock and denial, and I'm sure you were shocked and that it didn't happen, it's a dream, it's something, and then of course anger, and then we bargain with God, and then depression, and then your final acceptance. And so but this is what really helps, and we did some tapes for hospice, actually, and I will recommend your book to them, too, after we get finished the show. And
wonderful.
Yeah, because I think, people need help because, all of a sudden you're going along, like you say, and you're not thinking. When you left for work that day, you probably got dressed like you always do and did all the things you need to do, and it was just another day. And the same as my husband saying, I'll come home and make some chicken soup. It'll help her throat for our daughter because she seemed to be coming down with a cold. That's many years ago, of course. And so anyway, it still shocks you. And then I was glad that the last thing I said to him was, I love you. And I'm so glad because it would have been terrible. I know one lady that was so angry at her daughter, they had a big fight, and then she died, and she couldn't get over the guilt. So people need to know that in the story you're going to tell, I know, is going to help them get over the guilt. So I want to just let you go and tell us the story because I think it's really interesting, and I know it's going to help a lot of people.
I hope so. Yeah. What happened was, like I said earlier, I had initially planned on being a high school science teacher when I was a kid. I've always loved science. But that said, I've also always suspected that there is a lot more going on than meets the eye, and that there's a lot going on that our scientific instruments probably are not sensitive enough to pick up or understand. So I had those two notions in my head the whole time, that science is this amazing tool, but at the same time, I see its limits. But when my dad suddenly died, all I could think about was what my science teachers taught me in college. And that is that when a person dies, they are gone forever. According to most of mainstream science, what we think of as ourselves and what I thought of as my dad is just the result of chemical reactions happening in a brain. Yeah. And when that brain is no longer receiving oxygen, then everything that person ever was or thought they were is gone forever. And that thought was absolutely devastating to me. My dad was such an amazing man. We were incredibly close, and he was just the most loving person that I'd ever met to this day. And to think that someone as good as him, if everything that he ever was, all of his passion and ideas and dreams and all of that love that he had, if all of that could disappear in a split second as though he'd never walked the earth at all, I was in this existential crisis. I was thinking, well, then what's the point of anything if someone like this can disappear? And that's the place that I was in when something rather extraordinary happened that ended up changing our lives. And that is that someone who claims to be a medium, right? Someone who claims the ability to sense our loved ones who are no longer in a body in one way or another. And this woman, who is a medium, was a complete stranger to my family. To this day, we've actually never met this woman in person. But when my dad died, we did not know her at all. She lived in Arizona, and what happened is she was out there in Arizona and suddenly was getting this message from a man named Robert, who was desperate to get a message to his family that he was okay, that he had survived the death of his body, and he needed his family to know that. And she had the sense that it was connected to a guy named Chris, who is my second cousin, okay? So this guy, Chris, my second cousin, he is, he married into my family, but he was not a close cousin. I couldn't even picture him when my mom first called me to tell me the story of what had happened. And she said, Chris called our house. I said, Chris, I had no idea. I couldn't even picture who that was. And he never called our house. In my whole life, he had never called our house. But his friend, who is this medium, contacted Chris and said, I have this man named Robert. I think it's connected somehow to your family, and his family is involved somehow in a fish restaurant. And my sister owns a fish restaurant. So Chris, my cousin, second cousin, put this together and realized, oh, this must be Robert. Of my cousin Liz is Robert, her ex-husband. So about 2 or 3 days after the funeral, we had just laid my dad to rest, and we're all completely overwhelmed with grief, not sure how how we're gonna be able to go on with life. When my mom gets this phone call saying, Liz, this is your cousin Chris. You remember me? And she says, oh my God, yeah, Chris, hi. Very surprised to be getting a phone call from him because, again, they were not close at all. And he said, Liz, do you know what I do? I'm a ghost hunter on the weekends. And my mom said, okay. And she'd never heard of anything like that before. Chris, in his Monday to Friday 9 to 5 job, he's a hospital administrator. He has this this wonderful, very sort of straight-laced, science-y type of a job. Yeah. But on the weekends, he has a team that he ghost hunts with. They go to houses and try and use equipment to try to pick up on spirits that might be stuck in a house or haunting, quote unquote, a house. And this woman, this medium, her name's Christina, works on their team with him. So he said to my mom, on the weekends I do these ghost hunts, and I have a medium on our team, and she says that Robert, your ex-husband, has been tapping her on the shoulder with incredible desperation, needing to get the message to you guys that he's okay. Oh. So I got the call from my mom saying, hey, I just got this weird phone call from your cousin. And she told me all about it. And then my scientific brain went into overdrive. And I needed to know a lot more before I was going to.
I know he would.
Yes. So I called my cousin, and we spoke for a long time. And then he gave me this woman's phone number. And I called her, and we talked for a long time. And, mediumship is not something that I was aware of it just sort of in the way that the popular culture is aware of it, like the show Crossing Over with John Edward was on television when I was in high school, and there's the Long Island Medium, shows like that. But that was really all that I knew of mediumship. So when I called this woman, I was really starting from scratch, and really I was just trying to figure out if she was mentally stable or not,
I can imagine. I would too.
Right. And it became clear to me in the course of that hour-long conversation that one thing this woman was not was a liar or someone who was crazy. She seemed to me to be a very compassionate woman. And by the way, people ask me this all the time. Oh, well, how much money did you end up paying? There was no money involved in this at all. This woman never asked for a cent. She purely did this because she felt like my dead father needed her to do it. Yeah. And so after that conversation, I was intrigued, and I told my sister about it. And the next day or the day after that, my sister happened to be driving to work, and on the radio that morning, there was a medium who was doing a call-in show on the radio station who was taking, callers and supposedly doing readings for them, connecting them with their deceased loved ones. And that woman lives in Connecticut, where we do, as it turned out. So, and it seemed like an odd coincidence that I had just told, we had just gotten this call that supposedly this medium had gotten this message from my dad. And then the next day or two, my sister hears this medium on the radio that happens to have give readings in Connecticut. So my sister contacted this woman and set up a reading. She was going to come to our house and do a reading with us. And I had to test this woman. I was going to need real evidence to show me that this is a real thing, right? Because I had started to look a little bit into mediumship after I talked to this woman, Christina.
And your mind is so scientific, isn't it? So you'd have to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And I started looking into, because there are brilliant people in this world, right, who are mainstream scientists who say that there is no way my dad could have contacted a medium because when he died, right? There are really smart people who believe that. Uh-huh. And I started, and so if you believe that, if you are a materialist scientist who believes that all there is in the universe is electrons, protons, and neutrons, then someone like this woman, Christina, or the woman that my sister heard on the radio, they have to be lying. They have to be cheating, according to those scientists. There is no other explanation. So I looked into the ways that they say people cheat. There's things called cold reading or hot reading, where they're either looking on Facebook or doing research ahead of time, or they're just saying things that are very general, and the human brain tends to pick out things that make sense to us, even though they might not actually be significant. That's called patternicity. It's something the brain does. So anyway, I was aware of what the mainstream scientists say mediums do. So when this woman was coming to our house, I went to my father's house. He lived in Connecticut in a back lot. So I was all by myself in the woods. And I said, okay, Dad, this woman's coming here tonight. You know how my brain works. I need real evidence that what this woman is doing is genuine. So I'm going to give you a code word right now, and I need you to get this woman to say this code word, because if she doesn't say it, I'm not going to believe it. It doesn't matter what else she says. If she doesn't say this, I'm not going to believe it, okay? So the code word I came up with, I was standing in my dad's house, and suddenly I was flooded with this memory, sort of out of nowhere. When I was a little kid, my parents got divorced when we were very young, and we spent the weekends with my dad, my sister, and I, and we were so excited on Friday nights to see him that we had real hard time going to sleep at night. And he was living at his mom's house at that time, so he didn't have a bedroom, so we all slept out in the living room in sleeping bags, and it was just this exciting novelty. So we would ask him to play with our hair to help us fall asleep at night. We would say, Dad, 5 more minutes, and the poor guy, until his hands were cramped, would play with our hair. So that memory came flooding back to me all of a sudden, and I said, okay, this is it, Dad. I need you to have her mention my hair. You have to get this woman to mention my hair. That's the code. It serves another purpose in that my hair is incredibly average hair. It's just brown average hair. There's nothing about it, absolutely, that a stranger would walk in and think, oh, there's got to be a great story about this guy's hair. It's just, you wouldn't even notice my hair. So an hour later, she comes to the house and she does the reading, which lasts between an hour and 2 hours. And I was blown away within minutes. Within minutes of her starting, I was baffled, and my scientifically oriented mind was reeling because I could not understand what was going on. She was saying things that were definitely not published anywhere. It didn't matter how good of a private detective she might have hired. There were things she was saying. For instance, she almost quoted verbatim a conversation my sister and I had the day before when we were alone, a private conversation. Things like that. And at one point I was looking around the house because I'm thinking, we must have pictures up somewhere that she's looking at. Like, how is she getting this information? And I was so stunned that I totally forgot about my code word and the experiment that I'd set up, because I was already convinced that something was happening that mainstream science says is not possible. And we were all weeping but by the end of this thing, right? We're all in tears saying that this was one of the most extraordinary nights of our lives. So if this woman is a fraudster, right, as the mainstream scientists say she must be, she had done an amazing job. She had fooled everyone in that room, and everyone in that room was going to go out and tell 100 people how incredible and life-changing that night was, right? She's going to get a ton of work out of this. So if you're someone who's a snake oil saleswoman, that's when you leave, like your mission is accomplished. Just get out now while you're ahead.
Yeah.
But instead of doing that, while we're wrapping up to leave, we're like getting ready to go. And then apropos of nothing, she looked at me. She was in the middle of saying something else, and she stopped and looked at me and said, "Your dad wants me to talk about your hair."
Oh, my gosh.
And she said it. Yes, I still get shivers. Every time I think, this happened like 9 years ago, I still get shivers. And it took the breath out of me. It like knocked the wind out of me when she said it. But that's how powerful the moment was. And my sister and my mom are saying, "What's wrong? What's the matter?" Because I hadn't told anyone else on all of planet Earth that I had set up this little experiment. It was entirely just between me and my dad. So when she said that, it changed my life in an instant, and it completely boggled my mind. And it was hard to not think that any scientist who had gone through that whole day with me by my side would not have come out with the same questions that I now had. I mean, it was so stunning, and I just could not let it go. So about a year after that, what happened was I started telling my story to a lot of people because I was so stunned, right? And I was euphoric. Right afterwards, I felt like I was floating because it really felt to me like my dad had somehow, without a body, first contacted a stranger, this medium in Arizona, and then gave me my code word through this other medium here in Connecticut. So when people in my life over the following year, if they lost someone in their life, I told them my story, and I found that it was bringing people a lot of comfort.
Yeah.
And which I loved, right? But then once I started sharing this story, it became a real weight on my shoulders to make sure that I was telling them the truth. I wanted to really be sure that I experienced what I thought I did and that my mind hadn't played some kind of a trick on me or something, So I called this woman back and I said, "Listen, I had this amazing experience with you about a year or so ago. I would like to make a documentary about what you do. And I would like to bring people to you that you can do readings for on film, people that you will know absolutely nothing about. I'll sit you in a chair, I'll turn on the camera, and then I'm going to walk strangers in for you to give readings to. Would you do that?" And she immediately said, "Sure, I'll do that. Yeah." She immediately said yes. So that's what I did. And at this point, I've done this with maybe 20 different people now, total, complete strangers that I know there's no way she could have known. No. And I've watched her time and again come up with information that she couldn't possibly know. I've watched her change people's lives over and over again. It's a remarkable thing. And by the end of my, or where I am now, not by the end, because I'm still looking into all of this, obviously, but where I am now, I know that the scientists that taught me physics in college are not correct when they say there is no such thing as the quote-unquote paranormal, or that there is nothing outside of materialism, material science. I know now without a doubt that they're not right about that, because my experiences then went beyond mental mediumship into other things. But yeah, so that's where I am now.
Yeah, and when you think about it, really hair is not something you talk about. Men, anyway, don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like they don't say, they might say, your hair looks good today to a lady, or did you get a perm or something. But the word hair is not a common word like drink or coffee or tea or whatever,
Right.
So that was really good that he picked that word is what I'm thinking, that you picked that word to find out.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
Now,
like you said.
No. Did they go on to tell you what? Like, have you got something you can share with the folks? That do they say what happens after you go through a tunnel, or what like people say, or how do they say it works when a person dies, leaves the world?
Well, there's a lot of information about that. Now, this is of course less scientific in that we can't prove it right one way or the other, but there are overlapping lines of evidence that tell us a little bit about what might happen when we actually come out of a body, right? So you have someone like my dad who's communicating through a mental medium. They're not speaking in full sentences typically, right? The medium they're seeing images, they're getting feelings, sometimes they're smelling smells, and they're
getting a word, aren't you? Like a word comes up, a special word that means only to you and your father. Yeah.
Right. But it's not like she's saying, so your dad's standing here, and now he's saying that when he died, he came out, and then he saw his father standing there, and then they went to the pub and had a drink at the, it's not like full sentences. But there are other mediums who channel, supposedly, and what this means is they go into a trance, and we can say scientifically that their brain function does change. Someone who is going into what we would call a genuine trance, if we hook them up to an EEG, an electroencephalograph, we know that their brain waves shift from beta down into like alpha brain waves. So it's a brain pattern that is not what happens in your waking state. So we know that something is happening in their brains, right? Something that we can measure is happening. And some of these people claim that then once they're in this trance, spirits, people who are no longer physically in a body, are able to use their vocal cords in some way and speak for themselves in full sentences. So it would be as though my dad could speak himself. And there are whole books that have been written. If people are interested in that, whole books people have written about what it's like to be on the other side, what life is like on the other side. There's a book called The Spirits Book by Alan Kardec that is a popular one, and that will answer any question you could possibly ask about what life might be like on the other side.
Wow.
So there's really remarkable, people sometimes have near-death experiences, right, which is where they die for all intents and purposes. There's no more heart or brain activity, not discernible anyway, and they're dead clinically. And then they go on to have this incredible experience. And sometimes this happens, this happens more often now because we're getting better and better at resuscitating people. Now every restaurant has defibrillators, that you can shock someone with if goodness forbid someone goes into a cardiac arrest out at a restaurant or something. So more and more people are being resuscitated every day. So now we have thousands upon thousands of reports of what happens, what someone remembers when they die. In the most interesting of these cases, as far as science goes, things that we can prove are what are called veridical NDEs. So this is when someone dies, they come out of their body, and then they have an experience that we can verify that there's no way they should have been able to see. So for instance, they'll be on an operating room table and they'll go into cardiac arrest. And these cases are interesting also because they're hooked up to all of the monitoring equipment, right? So we know also they're under general anesthesia. Let's say they're having an operation and they're under general anesthesia, which according to mainstream science says consciousness should not be possible. That's what general anesthesia does. It makes it so consciousness, what mainstream science considers to be consciousness, impossible. You should not be able to have any experience of any kind. So they're on the table, they're hooked up to the monitoring machines, they go into cardiac arrest. There's no brain activity and there's no heart activity. And then they come out of their body. This is sort of a typical NDE, if there is such a thing as a typical, because they vary a lot. But they come out of their body, maybe they go up into the corner of the room, and now they're looking down on their body being operated on, and they can hear everything that's happening. So later on, after they're resuscitated, they're able to report everything that the doctor said. things that they could not have possibly heard. In even more interesting cases, they'll go out of the hospital room then, and let's say they go down the hall to the waiting room where their family is, and they hear the conversation the family is having. And later on, when they come back, they can report exactly, specifically what the conversation was down the hall at the very moment science says they were dead. And we know that because we have, everything is kept track of. We know the time that their heart stopped beating. We know the time that they were resuscitated. So we know the time, for instance, when the family was down the hall. So they hear these things that can be verified. Further interesting cases, there's a guy named Dr. Kenneth Ring and Dr. Sharon Cooper out of the University of Connecticut, I think it is. They wrote a book called Mind Sight. And these are particularly fascinating near-death experience cases where the person who died and then was resuscitated are blind, people who have been blind from birth. Okay. In some cases, the ocular nerve in this person is not even connected to their brain. They were born with an issue where their ocular nerve never connected to their brain. So there should be no way for a visual signal to get from the retina to the brain. There's no way to do that. There's no ocular nerve connection. But they die, they come out of their body, and then they have a fully visual experience, which cannot be possible according to mainstream science. And then they come back into their body, and of course they can't see anymore. But during the time that they were out of their body, that they sensed themselves as being out of their body, they're able to see for the first time in their lives. So just that one line of evidence alone is this fascinating thing. But just to get back to your question about what it might be like on the other side, the general, again, they vary a lot. The NDEs seem to be personal and they vary a lot. But one of the underlying things that is reported in probably 99% of the cases is this overwhelming feeling of love, of acceptance, they say that they now peace, total peace, and they understand what we mean by unconditional love. We use that word a lot here as human beings, but they feel like they know for the first time what it really means.
But they experience it, yeah. And have you ever heard of people that tried to measure, like someone said they measured the spirit or the soul, and it was like so much of an inch or something, or the weight.
Oh, yes.
They weighed it, and then it weighed less when the spirit left. Did you hear about that?
I did, yeah. I'm forgetting the doctor's name right now, but he did an experiment where he tried to do that. He weighed someone, just people. I think he only did it with like 5 people, just before death and just after death, and he determined that the weight of the soul was 21 grams.
21 grams.
So I have I have a chapter in my book called 21 grams, and I mentioned that, man. Now, those tests were widely derided, and there were issues with them, and it was a very small sample size. So, but I do wish we could maybe do that now with more sensitive equipment. It would be interesting to see.
I think we could. So now, your book, can you go through some of the chapters of the book so people can kind of get an idea?
Sure. Yeah. The first chapters of the book, that's what it starts with. I go into what happened with the mediums that I studied, and I came to the definite conclusion that just looking at the data, there's something statistically significant there about what they're doing, and then I started to talk to scientists. Once I got these results from my own little casual experiments, I wanted to know if any real science, because I'm an actor, right? I'm not the person who should be answering this enormous question that has relevance to everyone on the planet. There should be real scientists looking into this stuff if this data is available. And I was shocked to find that there are lots of studies that have been done. And so I started looking into research at the University of Arizona, at the University of Virginia, and a place called the Windbridge Research Center. And I started talking to those scientists about the studies that they are doing with mediums that are fascinating studies that come to the same conclusion I did, that something genuine is going on. And I recommend highly, if people are interested, that they look into Dr. Julie Beischel's work, and she is the woman who runs the Windbridge Research Center.
And how do you spell her name, Mike?
It's Dr. Julie and Beischel, Beischel.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Really special.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. Well, we folks, you're listening to the Dr. Anne Marie Evers Show, where dreams really can and do come true. And believe me, they come true every day. And also, I believe in affirmations, the power of positive thinking. And we're going to go for a short break, and we'll be right back after the break with my very special guest, Mike Anthony, and more on what's happening after we die, which is a very interesting kind of confrontational, or what do you call it, thing, people talking about it, but it is something that we all have to reckon with and we all have to do. So we'll be right back after the short break.
When was the last time you read a book that has created a profound impact on your life? This book is touching deep into the hearts of readers worldwide and empowering people with new hope to conquer over a life of despair, loneliness, and sadness. This book is called Affirmations Your Passport to Happiness by Dr. Anne Marie Evers. In this book, you'll learn the power of affirmations, creating visualization, goal setting, positive thinking, self-esteem, learn how to attract the perfect, lasting, successful career, relationship, and have optimal health. To order your copy, log on to www.affirmations-doctor.com or email AnneMarieEvers@shore.ca and get your passport to happiness. Affirmations, Your Passport to Happiness, the book that's giving people positive control over their lives once again.
Welcome back to the Dr. Anne Marie Evers Show, where dreams really can and do come true. And I'm talking with my very special guest, and we're talking about death, dying, and what happens afterwards. So I'm sure a lot of you have different ideas, and we'd love to hear. Just send me an email to AnneMarieEvers@shaw.ca, and that's ANNEMARIE. And then Evers, EVERS @shaw.ca, and I can get. I'll look at and read them over, and then I can forward them on to Mike, and we can talk about it. And I think this is very interesting, and I know it will help people out there, because right now there's so much fear that's running around, but isn't there, Mike?
Oh, yes. I mean, this year especially, death is so present in our lives, sadly. I mean, it always is, but in this past year especially.
Yeah,
so
you're
I
absolutely
do
right.
hope there is a lot of comfort to be found out there. There truly is.
Yes, and I think your book and going and checking out, check out www.AnneMarieEvers.com, and that's where you'll come up with all the videos we came up with different things that people can help them when they're dying to cope with that. And these are all free information that people can go and watch them and see. And they're very short. They're very colorful and short. They're only about 3 to 4 minutes long. So I think some are a little longer, but it's really interesting to watch them. So, well, getting on with Mike, what more do you have to lead it up? We've got about 10 minutes left, or 10 or 12 minutes.
Sure. Well, the what I'm looking into now, there's a series on Netflix called Surviving Death, which is a 6-episode series, and I'm part of my dad's story is featured in 3 of those episodes.
Oh, good.
So that's something. Yeah, that's something people can look into, and it looks into the different lines of evidence that we do survive in some way after death, and the different lines are mediumship. And one of the other really fascinating ones are children who have memories from previous lives. Is this something you're familiar with?
Yes. Oh, yes. And they'll say, we used to live in that house, and like 100 years ago, and you think, how do they know that,
Yes. So there's amazing research. This was one of the most fascinating things in all of the study I've done over the past, 8 or so years into this, is this study done by the University of Virginia, the Division of Perceptual Studies. And they've been working on this project for over 50 years now. And the evidence that what these kids are remembering, at least some of these kids are remembering, are real, actual memories from some other life, is overwhelming. The evidence is so overwhelming that even the Journal of the American Medical Association, for instance, right? I was shocked when I learned this. JAMA is one of the most respected scientific journals in the whole world. And when their book review editor, whose name I'm forgetting right now, but when their book review editor looked at the evidence compiled at the University of Virginia that these children's memories that can be verified are real, his conclusion was that reincarnation was the most likely explanation. And that's the book review editor from the Journal of the American Medical Association.
Wow.
And most people did not hear of that, which is funny because if the Journal of the American Medical Association concludes that, say, saturated fat in eggs is not as bad for us as we thought it was, it's splashed across the headlines. But when this guy concluded that reincarnation appears to be something that does happen, almost nobody heard about it, but the evidence is there, and it's extraordinary.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to ask you, Mike, did your dad have anything private to tell you when he talked to you, or just to say I'm safe, and what? How did that work out?
Yeah, he did say private things. I mean, largely when someone comes back, we can imagine that the main thing we would want to say is, I love you, I'm here, and I'm okay, right? Those are the main things.
They are.
But of course, the skeptics say that there's no evidence there then, and they're right about that. So what makes those statements meaningful to me is when the medium also says these other personal, private things. Otherwise anyone could be a medium if all we said was, yeah, they're there and they love you and they're proud of you and they're okay.
Yeah, that's true.
So for me, it's those statements combined with the verifiable statements. And my dad has come up with a ton of these little things. I won't say them on the air only because sometimes he repeats them through other mediums, and that's how I know whether or not a medium is the real deal for me. It's an interesting thing. He like is able to, he'll sometimes repeat a message through different mediums, which is fascinating to me. And again, they're very specific personal things that he says. So I advise that because, mediumship is something that a lot of people claim the ability to do, right? I was surprised actually at how many people claim this ability. And there are people who do it to more or less degrees of effect, right? Just like any other ability, there are levels of the ability, I think. And there might even be, sometimes there are people who are calling themselves mediums, and they might actually even believe they are, but they're not really doing what they think they're doing, So it can be a dicey situation sometimes. So I send people often to the Forever Family Foundation, which is a fantastic nonprofit organization. The website is foreverfamilyfoundation.org.
And one of the things sorry, what is it again? Forever?
Sure. It's foreverfamilyfoundation.org.
Okay, yes.
Foreverfamilyfoundation.org. .org.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. They're wonderful, and one of the things they do is they test mediums. They have a certification process. So if you think that you're a medium and you think that you have these abilities, you can go to them and be tested under these controlled conditions. Now, a lot of people apply to be tested, but only a small number of people pass the test. And they maintain a list on their website of mediums who have passed the test. So you can be sure that if you use one, and there are mediums that are located sort of all over the place. And I think every one of the people on their list now does readings via Skype or FaceTime or just on the phone. So you can reach these people from anywhere. But if you can be sure that the people on that list have been tested by an independent group of people and have been found to have true mediumistic ability.
Yeah. Now, Mike, how's the rest of your family coping? How long ago was it your father passed?
He passed in 2011. So 10 years ago now. But now we truly have no doubt that my dad is still with us. I mean, I mean that we literally, truly believe that I believe he's standing beside me right now. So the grief, like, do I miss hugging my father? Of course I do. Of course I miss his physical presence. But I sense him so strongly now because of everything that I've been through, that my grief, I would say, I've healed from that. And now I feel like my dad, my relationship with him has shifted. It hasn't ended. It's just changed. And that is a beautiful gift, to feel like you still have. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Wow. It blows your mind.
It does. It does. One of the things they're looking into at the Windbridge Research Center is the idea of using mediumship in grief therapy, because in traditional talk therapy, you're trying to get someone to accept the loss and then move on from it, right? That's what traditional grief therapy might do. Yeah. But with mediumship, it's different. You're not accepting the loss. You're accepting that there's been a shift in your relationship, but that you haven't lost them. So
it's a different type of relationship. That's all.
Indeed. Yes, that's right.
Now, I've been talking so much, and it's been so interesting, but please give us some of your information that people can get in touch with you.
Sure. The website is mikeanthony.com, and you can email me from that website. It's info@mikeanthony.com, but you can just click contact. And I have on that website the book, which is called Love, Dad, How My Father Died, Then Told Me He Didn't, and that's available on Amazon.com. And then I have a few videos on my website as well that shows a little bit of the some of the research. We filmed some of it, so you can see some clips of some of the things we've been up to on the website as well.
That's very interesting, and and I like the way you have it, the way he has it. You wrote it, or whoever did, and you have the comma there because it's it just sort of speaks to you. You have the comma after the love, comma, dad, right? So
yes,
it's coming from him.
It's from him, exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah, that refers to when my dad was here. When he left me a voicemail, he would always end it as though he were writing a letter, and he would say, "Okay, talk to you later. Love, Dad," as though he had been writing a letter. So that's yeah.
I like that too. And people that say to their parents, "Love you, Mom. Love you, Dad." And I try to do that too with my kids, and they do it. But it's so important because if we had more love in this planet, it would be a lot different, wouldn't it?
It sure would. Love is the key to all of it, I think. The absolute key to all of it.
Now, tell me, Mike, what are you going to do? What are you doing from here? Because you're getting in touch with all these different places and finding out more, and so you can share with others more. Is that what you're doing?
That's right. Yeah, I'm continuing to work. Once the world goes back to a little bit more normal, I'm continuing to work on a documentary because besides the Netflix series, I have a separate documentary that I'm doing. So I hope to get back to that to share a little bit more of this research.
Well, I call it nearly normal. If we get back to nearly normal,
that's right.
I'll be happy.
Right.
When
Me
we get
too,
back,
yes.
not if. I don't want to be negative here. So, folks,
that's right. We will.
Please check out the website again. Just give us it one more time in case people missed what you said about your information.
Sure. It's mikeanthony.com.
Okay, and where else can they get in touch with you? Any place else or just there?
It's all on that pretty much, everything. And then I'm on Facebook I think it's Mike Anthony 91. I think is my Facebook, or if you search Mike Anthony Hamilton, because that will usually, if you Google that should lead you to me as well.
Yeah, because I'm sure there's people that are listening that are thinking, why doesn't she tell us how to get in touch with him? Because that's what always happens. I always I get so excited in what I'm talking about or listening to what you're talking about that I just forget that. So I try to remember that because then I get people, well, you could have told us where to get them. So they know now. Yeah. And I want to, really thank you for taking time out of your busy day. And I know you're busy and just enjoying life and helping people along the way. That's what it's all for, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it's been just an absolute joy to be with you, and thank you for what you do.
Well, I love chatting with you too, and I know we can do this again. and you get some more information, you just give me a call or send me an email, and I'll be glad to. I've been doing these shows. This is for 16 years now, twice monthly.
Wow.
In fact, I was doing it 4 times a month, but I couldn't get my other lectures to work in, so I had to kind of get 2 times a month. But I love it because I meet wonderful people like you and find out more things. And if I have questions, I can always ask the wonderful guests I have. And the lady that referred you to me, she's one of my favorite ladies, and she's just so wonderful. So I love getting guests that she sets up for me, you know.
Yes, she's the best.
Yeah. And so now, what would you say? Just think about we've got just about 5 minutes left. 5 minutes left. What would you say to the people out there now that maybe have people in rest homes, or maybe they're losing them through COVID or something? What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a big thing. People who the dying process in our country is sort of very removed from us, right? We kind of lock it away in hospital rooms, and in times past, death was more of a part of life, and it wasn't hidden away as much. People died at home, for instance, much more in years past, and so people were closer, and it was more of a part of life rather than this sort of separate thing. Death, from everything that I understand, that I've come to understand and believe, is death is a transition. It's not the end of anything at all. It's simply a transition. There's this beautiful story about Steve Jobs, who is the founder of Apple, this brilliant guy who passed away a few years back. And when he was dying, he was in his room, and his family was gathered around him. And he said bye to everyone. They all kissed and hugged goodbye. Yeah. And then he looked up over their shoulder, like up into a corner of the room, and he said, "Oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow." And those were his last words. He said, "Oh, wow,"
I'll get
3
shivers
times.
Again. Oh, goodness.
Yes. And he was clearly seeing something amazing, and I believe that that's where we're all headed. And it's nothing to be afraid of. We're so afraid of what we don't know, but from all that I've learned, there is nothing to fear. People who are facing death now, people are coming to help with that. From everything that I understand, you're never alone in the dying process, and someone will be there to greet you and show you the ropes, and all is going to be well.
Yes, and I want to thank you for coming on, and be sure and say hello to Robert when you're talking to your dad.
I sure will.
Yeah, it'd be fun to meet him sometime. But one never knows what happens, do they? But I just want everyone to be able to know how to get a hold of you, and you can maybe tell them again different things that we couldn't cover today. And I know you're very busy, and I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and visit with us for this hour. And
my pleasure.
And I really look forward to talking to you. And if you can just send me a quick email if something different happens and you have some more information, I always like to share with the people, the listening audience, because there's so good new things are always good for us to learn, no matter what age we are or what age the information is. It's always good, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you so much, and have a great rest of the time, and keep on your work. Research is very important, so keep it up. We're proud of you, so keep it going. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you're so welcome. Okay, have a good one then. Bye-bye, Mike.
Well, if you have a problem and you don't know where to go, just dial up the internet and listen to the show. Tune in to Dr. Evers, she'll lift your spirits high. Her affirmations lead you from the darkness to the light. Say thank you, thank you, thank you, believe with all your soul. When properly done, they always work, you know. Oh, just say an affirmation. Love, health, and abundance beginning to show. Oh, just say an affirmation. Show your gratitude and the blessings will flow. Oh, just say an affirmation. Love, health, and abundance beginning to show. Oh, just say an affirmation. Show your gratitude and the blessings will